I'm about to go ahead and knock out this workout, but I just have some final thoughts on the Marvin Sapp thing. Now, obviously, I've already touched on this twice. I touched on it before it went viral, and then I spoke on it for a couple minutes the other day after it went viral. And since then, Marvin Sapp has put out a statement. And of course, he's quoting scriptures and claiming he did nothing wrong. And for lack of a better terms, he's stretching the truth, if not outright lying. But he said one thing in that statement that's absolutely true, and people missed it, right? When he said that the conferences and all these kinds of things have budgets, he's absolutely correct. So now using his statement, let's go back and look at the situation. This was actually one of these conferences because whether we like it or not, a lot of church activity is more tradition and business than it is biblical, right? And so a lot of these conferences are business. And so for those of you who are not in the church or you like conferences, what do you mean? So let me break it down for you. In many instances, what will happen is a particular pastor or a particular denomination or a particular church will throw an event. And this event can range anywhere from 2 days or 2 nights to 3 to 5 nights to a whole week. And during this event, each different day, there will be like a different person singing and there'll be a different person preaching that is not a part or a member of that particular church. And so what happens is you get a bunch of different singers and pastors to come together in one location from all over the country. And it's usually popular pastors, popular singers with big names, right? Then you put out a flyer and say, we're having this revival or this conference or this convocation, whatever name you want to throw on it, right? So you put out the flyer, this event is happening on this date, all these different preachers are coming, go ahead and book yourself your hotels and get your tickets and all this kind of stuff. It's like, if you're familiar with online space, it's kind of the same as like when a manosphere guy builds up a platform and then he says, you know what, I'm going to throw a masculinity conference and so I'm going to find all these other YouTubers who have big platforms and I'm going to invite them over to, we're going to do a whole event together. It's the same thing in the church. So when he says there's a budget, he's absolutely right. Because he was on the flyer. S.Y. Younger was on the flyer, Carolyn Showell was on the flyer, and about 4 or 5 other people were on the flyer, meaning these are all people who are going to speak or preach or sing at this particular conference, right? And so just to be on the safe side, because, people like to get technical with the words, I'm not going to say that all these people are paid to be there, but what I will say is a portion of the budget is allocated for the people you see on the flyer, right? So a portion of make sure y'all hit the like button as y'all come in, right? And so a portion of the budget for that particular conference is going to go to all the people on the flyer. So Carolyn Showell, Marvin Sapp, S.Y. Younger. And so when he said there's a budget, and that's why he was raising the money, it actually explains a lot. It puts a lot into perspective if you're paying attention. Because once again, these are business decisions and deals that are made that really have nothing to do with Christianity or the gospel. And so, because if you go back, and those of you who really do your research, what you'll recognize is the Marvin Sapp offering where he's asking for the $40,000, that is not the initial offering. The initial offering took place, and once again, for those of you who don't go to church, I'm going to break it down for you. The initial offering usually goes on before the preacher preaches, right? That's usually what happens. The initial offering takes place before the preacher preaches. You have the offering, and also right usually at that time is where you get the announcements and you greet the visitors. And then after that, there's one more song, and then the preacher preaches. So that wasn't even the initial offering. They had already had an offering. And in that offering, there was another speaker up there saying, I think there's such and such people up here. I think we got 12 people who have $800. And we got this amount of people with $100. So this is already, my bad. So they had already had an offering. They had already raised an offering. And what happens in a lot of churches these days is this. After the preacher preaches and he gets finished hollering and screaming and speaking in tongues and prophesying to you and telling you how God wants you to have this and God wants you to have that, then they keep the music playing softly in the background and you're feeling good and people is crying and feeling hopeful, and then they raise some more money. That's how it goes. You have the offering, the choir sings a song, the preacher comes out there and he preaches, right? And he goes, and God said, ha, it's your time, ha, it's your season, ha, I feel God in the room, ha, right? He does all of that, right? And people are excited and people running around and dancing and screaming and shouting. And then after he's finished, they start playing the music real softly, right? And then he goes, how many of you believe that God is working in your life? It's now time for you to sow into the vision. And once again, for those of you who don't go to church, when they say it's time to sow, that means it's time to give some more money. And once again, this is now the second offering, because they already had an offering before he preached. But now that he done preached and you done got excited, now it's time to hit you for some more money, right? And so that's actually the portion of the sermon where Marvin Sapp was in. That's why he said, how many of you feel like you got something from the word today? For those of you who go to church, you know that's a setup. Once he asks you if you feel like you got something from the word, if you say, I feel like I got something from it, okay, well, since you got something from the word, it's time for you to sow a seed that says that you believe God. And after that, that's when they start lying on God, right? God told me that is 50 people in here with 150. God ain't told them that, but they always, you got to throw God in there because people believe it for some other reason. So God told me it's 50 people in here with $150. And if that's you, come on up here right now. Come on up here right now while the Spirit is moving in the room. Every time they ask you for money, the Spirit is always moving in the room. Anytime they ask you for money, God is always doing something, and he's doing it right now. Every single So that's what Marvin Sapp was doing. And why am I talking about this one last time? Because, once again, it went viral. Because us church folk have been talking about this for about a month or so now. But now you see it on the Shade Room. You see, I'm seeing all kinds of content creators who don't talk about the church at all covering this. I'm seeing black folk on the political side talking about this. I'm seeing everybody's talking about this. And I'm glad it's happening. This is important. Because if we're going to keep it all the way real, there are so many different things. Make sure you hit the like button. There are so many different things that have been going on in our churches that really are not biblically sound and have nothing to do with God or salvation. It has something to do with tradition and the popularity of the preacher. Right? There's certain customs and practices and traditions that are in our churches, and that we kind of put we try to put a Jesus label on it and say that this is God and this is when really no, this is just something that we've always been doing in the churches that have nothing to do with God. But what happens is the church has kind of been in its own bubble. And so There's a lot of different things that churches have been doing that, quite frankly, they should not be doing. And ironically, it's the church's own desire for money and the desire to grow their memberships that's actually exposing them. That's the ironic part. A lot of these churches are out for money. They're out for fame. They want to have large numbers. They want to make a whole lot of money. And so they're putting themselves out there on the internet as an attempt to gain popularity and to gain more members. And in the process of doing that, they're actually exposing a lot of things that are out of order with them. So their desire to grow is actually what's being used to expose them, their own desires. That's the funny part. Their own desire for growth and more money is what's actually going to expose a lot of them. Because now that you're putting all this content out there and all these services and doing this and doing that because you want to grow your membership, when people start to click on and they go, hold on, that's what they're doing in there? Now you're starting to look crazy. And so we should expect more of this, not less. There's going to be more people that are in the world, not in the church, who are going to see more and more of things that the church is doing, and it's going to, folk are going to start to look real crazy, real funny in the light. So just be prepared for that. I wouldn't be surprised if another church, another pastor goes viral within the next week. Because and a lot of y'all might not know this if you don't go to church, but Marvin Sapp is not the only person that does this. This is actually a regular practice in a lot of churches. A lot of churches, every Sunday, have an offering before the word, have another offering after the word, and they say, God said this many people are supposed to give this amount of money, and you got to sow a seed into this, and God is good. That a lot of churches do that every week. A lot of pastors are full of ego and exercise way too much authority over grown adults in the congregation. A lot of pastors are doing way too much to seem culturally relevant and hip. And once again, their own desires for more money, more fame is what's going to be used to pull a lot of people down. They're going to wind up exposing themselves inadvertently. Because they're going to invite all these people to come in because they want more members and more viewers and more this and more that. And once some of these people who are not from the church come in there, they're going to look at what's going on and say, hold on, this what y'all be doing in church? This what y'all be doing? That's what's going to happen. So expect more churches and more pastors to be exposed, because there's a lot of stuff that's normalized in church culture that for whatever reason, us in the church, we kind of just accept it. But once again, as pastors and churches keep inviting the world in because they want to grow the brand, there's going to be more and more people saying, hold on, man. This is what's going on in church? So just be prepared for that. It's going to be somebody go viral next week.